Welcome to Conservation Cafe with Joe Mornini of Team River Runner. I'm Eliza Cava, the Director of Conservation with Audubon Naturalist Society. And I'm so thrilled to talk to Joe for two reasons. One, because I'm really excited about his work with Team River Runner and increasing the accessibility of nature to people who have all sorts of mixes of abilities and disabilities. And two, because I am a whitewater kayaker, although a little out of practice with my two small children. I have had the great fortune of kayaking with some people who learned from Team River Runners, some veterans. And it's just such a cool organization and so well supported by and integrated into the paddling community here in DC that I've known about it for years, but never really engaged other than paddling with some folks who came out of the program. So I'm just thrilled to learn more and talk some NAR as well. And so I'll introduce Joe just briefly. I'm mostly going to let him introduce himself because he's really a pleasure to hear speak. But he had a long career as a teacher in Montgomery County Public Schools. And over time, he was telling me he just realized that there was this huge opportunity and need in our returning service members coming back to the Washington area and getting treated at Walter Reed. And he was a passionate kayaker and just thought there was a way to get people in touch with movement and motion and their bodies again in a way that Team River Runner was you'll tell us when Team River Runner was founded and what kinds of specific issues you were seeing with the returning veterans that prompted you to feel like this was the right thing. And it's grown nationwide. There's chapters everywhere in all sorts of paddling communities, coastal and riverine, and it's just really exploded. And so much of it is volunteer driven. And sort of by and for the veteran community and within the veteran community. So it's just a huge gift that he's given of accessibility, but he has many other passions, which I hope he'll tell us a little bit about. We seek to create a larger and more diverse community of people who treasure the natural world and work to preserve it. And we have been really focused on the big idea: inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And this is our first conservation cafe on the really focusing on this topic of accessibility. We at ANS have done a lot of work on accessibility for people with physical disabilities, including creating a new smooth surface accessible nature trail that can be moved down by someone who relies on an assistive device or simply is a little unsteady. We've been doing more and more nature walks with veterans from Walter Reed specifically. And we have been just thinking about signage and interpretation and the way doors open and close, the way you get around our facilities, where we have ramps, just little things in our physical plant that allow us to be more accessible to more people so that everyone can come and experience our beautiful natural sanctuary. And whenever you're ready to tell me the screen share, go for it.
I'm ready.
Okay.
And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. I actually took a course at the Audubon Natural Society years and years and years ago with Joe Howard. I don't know if you remember Joe Howard, but he's been around a long time. And maybe and one of my good friends was very connected. I worked at the Smith Center, the Smith Environmental Education Center for the county school system when I first came in. So I really appreciate the opportunity just to talk to your folks, and I'm glad you're taping it so that you can just share with other individuals. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, Team River Runner. I guess I'll also be talking about me a little bit, although I hate to talk about me, but it's,
I hope you will talk a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, so I never walked the normal path that most people do. It took me a long time to get through school, through college, to be able to become a teacher. And I actually became a teacher because I was doing outdoor experiences with kids. I was doing a lot of backpacking and hiking and climbing, just outdoor activities, high adventure, and also some working at the Smith Center. I was having kids that we worked with. I worked with at-risk kids, and we would go and do beekeeping and plant trees and do a lot of work at the Lathrop Environmental Education Center out there in Rockville. And so during the time that I was doing that, I was working for the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County. I was working for both a drop-in center for kids that just hung out on the street to try to get them off the street and get them into a a physical space that they would not get themselves in trouble, and can maybe talk through some issues they might be having with each other or with their families, and try to, get back on a path to finishing school and having some kind of success in the community, other than hanging out in the street and getting in trouble, which is what the kids that we focused on. So that's kind of how I got into the school system, was because I used nature and the outdoors and activities, kind of help them get reconnected to something outside of, hanging out in a 7-Eleven parking lot. So I got the job in Montgomery County Public Schools working with at-risk kids, and was worked for many years at Twain School, where I had an outdoor education program, and they basically gave me a self-contained class of the kids that were the least likely to be successful in school. So it's a really difficult, at-risk students, which I loved. They were awesome. They reminded me of me. And we did, every day we went and did outdoor activities. Then we'd come back and write about them and do, academic work that was based around the outdoor activities that we did. So that was kind of how I got into the school system. I eventually whittled my way through college and got a degree and got a teaching certificate so that I could actually teach for Montgomery County Schools as a special education teacher, and worked my way up the ladder to staying a teacher, which I was happy to do. I actually was a resource teacher, so I did a lot of work with inclusion programs for the Mark Twain kids. At that time, Mark Twain stopped being Mark Twain. They became a different type of program, but I was working with at-risk kids up for about 40 years. So during that entire time, I became a paddler. I canoed, canoe camped, kayaked, went around the country and kayaked. And I mainly kayaked because I have a very, my right knee has since been replaced. About a few years ago, I had it replaced. I had difficulty with mobility with my right knee. So I could walk and hike and do a lot of things, but as I got older, it became more difficult. So mobility was like not the best thing for me, and kayaking was a mobile activity. I could sit in a kayak and pretty much go anywhere. And so I took up kayaking, and eventually I took up teaching kayaking through various schools in the county, Caleva, Valley Mill, Liquid Adventures, Scott Coulter's program, Outdoor Excursions. And I also taught kayaking to students in the school system at the same time. So I was kind of working with the outdoors as an opportunity for kids that, didn't really fit into the normal educational model. I would take them out, paddling, or I would take them out hiking, and I was doing kayaking on the side as just my way of staying, healthy and fit and being reconnected. I really would rather be outdoors than anywhere. I like being out under the sky and walking in the trees, or just being anywhere that's outdoors. And so kayaking fit the bill. So around 2004, both Iraq and Afghanistan were going hot and heavy, and I was kayaking pretty regularly, and I was feeling pretty useless to help a nation that was really involved in 2 wars. And I've always felt that it's important, if you have what I've had in life, which is a lot of benefits. I've been very, very fortunate. Riley, no, that's my dog. I love Riley. She wants to go in and out the door, so she gets a treat. She'll calm down in a second. Anyway, saw these individuals that were returning in the front page of the Washington Post. They were sitting in wheelchairs, and a friend of mine, Mike McCormick, and I were talking one day after we went paddling about those individuals in the wheelchairs. We thought, well, let's put them in a kayak. If they're going to sit in a wheelchair, why should they be doing that when they could be just as mobile as we are in a kayak? And we'll figure out how to outfit the boat. We had no idea about outfitting anyone who had a disability at the time. We just figured we'd learn. At the time in 2004, adaptive paddle sports was in its infancy, is a great way of putting it. There was the American Canoe Association, which we're very connected with, had some training around it and some efforts to create adaptive devices, but it was really pretty new, wasn't being done very much, and there was a lot of limitations that were placed on people that had disabling conditions to be able to go out and paddle in a kayak or any kind of a paddling sport. So we, Mike was a co-founder in 2004, and we invented out of thin air Team River Runner. And Mike stayed around for a couple of years. We both co-coordinated the program, and it grew around both of us in our endeavors. But after about 2 or 3 years, Mike got married, had kids, and needed to move on. And we were, by that time, a very small and continued to be an underfunded nonprofit. But we were really underfunded then. We were borrowing boats from Liquid Adventures, borrow the van from Liquid Adventures, and would drive down to Walter Reed on Tuesdays and do a kayak session in an indoor pool at Walter Reed when it was in Washington, D.C. in 2004. As a matter of fact, we're still at Walter Reed. I just did a pool session today at Walter Reed. I literally just drove home from a pool session we did with some disabled veterans or active duty individuals at Walter Reed just now. So we're still doing it. So though these many, many years later, we're still at Walter Reed. And I'll talk a little bit about the progression of how our program grew. I see that there are 2 chats. Is there a question? I'm really happy to stop and answer questions as they go along so that people don't zone out when I'm talking.
Neither is a question yet. It's just me chit-chatting and telling the audience to ask us questions proactively. So
yeah, please ask questions. You know, anything you ask is in bounds. You know, when you don't know something, that's what you don't know, and that's why you ask a question, no matter what it is. And so it's always good to just fill in a gap of something you don't know so you can understand better. We are an adaptive and adventure paddle sports program. And we started at Walter Reed in 2004, and our first pool session was September, the first week or so of September of 2004. That pool at Walter Reed was on the 3rd floor. And so we would carry the kayaks. We would park in the front of the building right at 5 o'clock after they did the bugle call to end a business day, EOBD, and lower the flag. And they would blow the bugle. It was a loudspeaker, and people would be going home. And then we would start carrying our kayaks in, and the patients that were there, the service members that were wounded, would be also coming in at about the same time on buses from Germany. They would the plane would land at Andrews Air Force Base. They'd put them on these basically just like you saw on TV, MASH-like buses, school buses that were made to have stretchers go on them, and they would take them off the stretchers they're much more, all these years later, they're much nicer buses. They're very, very professional and rigged out. But back then they were just those buses. So we'd walk right by the stretchers of these recently returning wounded Marines and Air Force and Army, whoever was there. They'd be laying on the stretchers with the bottles hanging in the air and blood on their bandages. And we'd say hi to them as we went by and say, hey man, you're going to get better pretty soon. And when you do, we got a kayak for you. You're going to come kayak with us. And then we'd go into an elevator and carry the boats up an elevator. And it was a little tiny therapy pool. And we put hundreds of veterans through that pool until they finally moved Walter Reed to Bethesda, where it is now. It was called Base Realignment and Closure, BRAC. And so they closed the old Walter Reed and they merged it with Bethesda Naval. Now it's called Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, which is where I just went. And it's a complex that's complicated and difficult to navigate, but we use a pool there, and the rec therapists that are there, they bring the patients to us, and we take them kayaking still. So back in 2004, we'd borrow the van. I'd go pick up the van after I get off work at school, and I'd grab Tom's van from Liquid Adventures and drive to Walter Reed, and we do the session, and then I'd drive the van back to Tom and leave it with him, sometimes without gas. That's just another story. And then I would go home, and we did that on Tuesdays, and we continue. Now we've changed it to Wednesdays. And then on the weekend, we invented doing paddling programs that we would go to either Violet's Lock or to some Anglers Inn, which is where I was used to going to.
So if people don't know those, I know those locations, but let's just describe. Those are access points to the Potomac, to the Mather Gorge section of the Potomac, which is where the whitewater is, but it's not Great Falls. And
Correct.
There's also flat water that you can access from a sandy beach below the Anglers Inn is the restaurant there. And then you can walk down to a sandy beach at a wide, slow spot in the river and practice your strokes, your rolls, right? So just to make sure, in case people aren't aware.
And to talk to the folks, we're talking about accessibility here. It wasn't very accessible, but we would get wheelchairs there and amputees and blind or visually disabled veterans to those locations with a little bit of effort. So to go back to we started at the pool, and we had these wounded individuals coming to us, wounded and sometimes sick. So, and then we'd have some individuals came that had what was called the invisible disability. They had post-traumatic stress, or they had a TBI. And so the very first word that started to describe us was lifestyle. So there's like 4 words that I'll talk about that is what Team River Runners culture is. So lifestyle was, we said, hey, we paddle all the time. It's a lifestyle for me. I go paddling all the time. It's the way I stay healthy and fit. And so we want them to have regular paddling activities. We don't want to just do this every now and then. We're going to come every week, twice a week. We're going to have a river session on the weekends, and we're going to have a pool session during the week. And we want to have them become paddlers, and it's a lifestyle. So that's still our thing, is that our program is based around chapters that have regular paddling events, lifestyle sessions. We do have events. They're in the adaptive sports world. There are event-based programs and lifestyle-based programs. We're lifestyle-based with events to encourage, instruction and leadership, but we paddle regularly in all of our chapters. So we're in a pool, we're doing this lifestyle paddling, and in comes an individual who doesn't look wounded at all. In fact, he looked, about as chiseled as, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he was like, hey, can I play too? I'm here getting treatment in Walter Reed. And we never ask anybody what their issue is. When you're dealing with someone who has a disabling, I'll keep pointing out things as I remember them as I'm going along. The largest minority in America are the disabled. So there are so many different ways of looking at disabilities, and it's the largest subset of, the minority population in America is the disabled, and they come in all shapes, sizes, and permutations, and many of them, the disability is invisible. And I can tell you from, some personal experience, but also from dealing with these individuals for all these many years, including the ones I work with in the school system, the at-risk kids, that it's that emotional weight that people carry around trauma or upbringing or roadside bombs or car accidents that jumble the brain. It's that invisible disability that you just don't see with people that is really something that you need to always be thinking about. So point 1 about adaptations for getting people into nature is such a powerful way to get individuals reconnected, not only with themselves, but with other individuals. And never forget that many of them have an invisible disability, and just getting them out under the blue sky or even in the rain, hearing the birds, it's just so powerful. So our first word is lifestyle. And then this guy comes in, and he's almost as chiseled as I am. And he asked if he could play. We'd say, sure. So the next word that it would describe us is inclusive. Everybody can play in Team River Runner. I don't care who you are. If you come and you want to help us, volunteer for us, and you don't have any kind of a disabling condition, come in and paddle with us and help us reach out and do outreach. I never talk to anyone, and I've been talking for these 17 and a half, almost 18 years about this program. I always end, and I'll end it today the same way. If you know somebody we can help, a veteran who someone in a family who they served and they came home and they're not the same, because they're not, bring them to us, because they have a safe place with Team River Runners, because we're a lifestyle program, and because we're inclusive, and because it's veterans trying to help veterans. It's very, very powerful. Veterans, it doesn't matter what service they were in. It doesn't even matter if they were in the war. They could have served, 30 years ago and just, been behind a desk, but they're a veteran. They went through the training. They signed the check that said payable up to and including, and they all kind of know things about, and they tease each other. They're relentless. They're vicious, but not us. But they also are reintegrating. So that's the other thing we discovered, is that we're a lifestyle program and we're inclusive. So if we're inclusive, it means everybody's involved. And then one of the big things the Veterans Administration wants with their veterans is reintegration. When someone leaves the service, especially if they've been there for a long, long time, they have a really hard time fitting into the community. Well, I'm the community, give it as it may. And so for them to be able to be around other veterans and at the same time around boaters or volunteers that are trying to help them, or just have a nice day on the water, is very, very powerful. It helps them to feel more connected to the community. And what better way to be connected than to be out on the water where you can kind of float away from somebody and be in your own little world, or you can paddle up and paddle with somebody and have a nice conversation of whatever you want to talk about. So reintegration is a very powerful part of Team River Runner because it gives veterans an opportunity to be with each other and to learn, from each other what they've been able to go through themselves to kind of heal and get better. So the next phase of Team River Runner is purpose. After a few years, word got out throughout the nation because the paddling community kind of knows people in other areas. They're, one or two paddlers might know one or two paddlers somewhere else. And so in Texas, in San Antonio, Texas, there was a young man named Ben Quanley, and he was starting to do some adaptive stuff himself. And he was like, hey, the BAMC, Brooke Army Medical Center, is down here. And that's another location where a lot of the wounded warriors would go. I'd like to hook up with you guys. And so he became a chapter of Team River Runner. So we were like, oh, we're going to have chapters. This is going to be really kind of interesting. I had no idea. Let me be honest with you. I'm a special ed teacher and a kayaker and a parent. And I have no experience at all running a nonprofit. And here I am, the executive director of a large nonprofit. So the Peter principle is living large in me. You rise the level of your incompetence. That's me. So we started a chapter system, and we became a chapter of a very large and wonderful organization called Disabled Sports USA, which is now called Move United. They rebranded themselves as Move United because I guess they took the word disabled out, but whatever. And we're a chapter of them. We're kind of like grandfathered in because we don't fit the model of all their chapters because we're a national program. So we started to grow chapters, and we became a 501c3, and we started to create a system of how chapters should be run, what kind of activities. They should be lifestyle activities. They should be inclusive. They should be purposeful. And purpose means that if there's veterans that are paddling with you, you should teach them how to help other veterans, teach them how to teach. So purpose became a huge part of Team River Runner within just a few years. We had veterans that we were relying very strongly on to drive our van, load the boats, unload the boats, teach, learn, spread the word, get other veterans involved, do the outreach because, again, we're a large nonprofit with a very small staff. And so we rely greatly on volunteers. All of our chapters are volunteer led, all of them. We have grown in our 17 and a half years that we are now in 34 states, and we have 68 active locations, chapters or mini chapters, where we have volunteers teaching veterans how to paddle. On a non-COVID year, we paddle more than 2,000 different sessions nationally per year around the country. And we work with, somewhere north of 2,100 to 2,200 different unique veterans each year. And probably in our 17 and a half year history, we've worked with over 10,000 veterans. So we are a very, very large program with a lot of volunteers, hundreds of volunteers, and literally hundreds and hundreds of boats all over the country. We have 50 trailers in the country. We have a budget and a board of directors, and it's an amazing organization to be involved in. It's a calling to be able to work for. We're all people that work for Team River Runner. I call them unicorns. They're very unusual. They're not many of them, but we got them. And when they take hold of the volunteer opportunity that Team River gives them, they are awesome. They are amazing. We have invented adaptive technology and instructional methods that we can put into a kayak, almost anyone with a disability, up to and including a quadriplegic that cannot move their arms, That would be someone that would have to be in a double kayak. We'd have to paddle them because they have no ability to be mobile. Or someone who has a either a tracheotomy, so they have to breathe through a hole, or they cannot close their mouth because of a neurological issue. So if they go in the water, they won't be able to roll over and they would be in trouble. Although we do have one veteran who has a tracheotomy who goes paddling with us, and every time he signs this thing, if something happens to me, it's not your fault. I'm choosing to. And even then, I'm like, God, I can't believe the liability of. But he doesn't want to be away from the other veterans in the program. And if someone has, this is true. If someone is an incomplete quadriplegic means all four limbs are affected by paralysis of some amount. But if they can use their arms, but they can't use their hands, we have the technology for them to be able to independently paddle on their own in a boat as an incomplete quadriplegic and be stable in the boat and be mobile in the boat and be comfortable in the boat. We have the technology. Now, part of that we invented this stuff to be able to do that, but then a wonderful young man named Kevin Carr created his own program, which is a for-profit program. You can look it up. It's called Creating Ability. And he makes adaptive devices that we use all over our chapter system. So might be something for you to consider as you continue to try to create accessibility into the forests and the marshes and the places you want to take folks that have disabling conditions. Creating Ability, Kevin Carr, he's awesome. He's a genius. And he gives a lot of stuff to us for us to actually really literally try to break it with veterans that have disabilities, because then he'll make it better. So it's really a wonderful partnership. He's out of Minnesota. We also have the guiding opportunities that we can guide a blind or visually disabled veteran on whitewater. We are the only program in the world that I'm aware of that is willing to have individuals who are blind paddle their own independent boat in whitewater. We feel we're very, very comfortable doing that where we know the location. We think through very carefully what river, what rapids, what can they do. And one of the rivers that we've had them run is the Grand Canyon. So if you've ever seen video of the rapids in the Grand Canyon, they're the largest wave trains in America, but they're wave trains. So there's not a whole lot of rocks to hit. So if one of our blind veterans should come out of their boat, which they did, we would be able to get them we'd have enough safety around them that they would always hear a voice. They'd have a life jacket on and we would help them. But we also trained them to be able to stay in their boat so we could, if they didn't roll the kayak, you guys have heard the word Eskimo roll. Well, the Eskimos invented rolling a kayak because they would use the boats to go out and hunt. And that's how they were subsistence. And they would literally sew themselves into a sealskin boat. They sewed themselves into it. And if they didn't roll, if they were upside down, they were in the boat. If they came out of it, it was cold, they'd die of exposure, but they had to be able to roll. So we taught rolling to these blind veterans. And we also taught them how to stay in their boat so that we could bring them back up, which we would do.
Wow.
And there is a little video, if you're interested, that I sent you that if you would like to show it, I can talk to you a little bit. It's only 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. And you're certainly, anybody who watches this is welcome to download it and show it to people. We want everybody in the world to know what we're doing, because if a veteran sees it, they might want to come paddle with us. So go ahead.
Okay. All right. And people should be able to hear you speaking over the video if you want to.
Well, this is Brian. He's also missing a leg. He lost his leg and his vision in Iraq.
Okay.
And he's wearing the face mask because he doesn't like when the water hits him in the face, because it's shocking to him. There's another individual that's also wearing a face mask. And then the rest of the blind paddlers just use sunglasses. The other individual, Travis, when he was blown up in his Humvee, he was on top of the Humvee. They had to rebuild his face, and there was no tissue left between his nose and his lungs. So the water would go directly up his nose and right into his lungs. And so we had to adapt for that. And the way we adapted was, put on a face mask. Doesn't matter if it fogs up because you can't see. So, but no water goes down his lungs. And so you're going to hear, so you should turn the sound up and listen to what Travis and Brian have to say about the opportunity to paddle as blind veterans.
Here we go.
Often when I hear a rapid approaching, it feels like I'm making a decision to go to battle with kind of a roaring monster. I keep going to battle with them over and over because at the end, it's so exhilarating. I feel powerful, I feel freedom, I feel the kind of strength that I felt when I was a soldier.
Kayaking best suited me because I felt like when I'm on the water, it's just me versus the water. Everything that's on shore is left on shore. If I'm not feeling and I'm not listening, I am subject to being a tragedy, and I want to be a triumph. I have guides, you know, and I have to hone in on them, and I have to feel the water so there is no distractions. We call our teams pods. The orca whales and the dolphins are all in pods. They're there to protect each other. In the military, we had this motto that no man is left behind. And you have to have confidence in them to know that they're gonna be right by your side. I was in a situation where I couldn't get out of. I tried to roll out of it, and my paddle was just stuck in its vortex. And I'm paddling on my boat, and just out of nowhere, this hand just reached up and grabbed me and pulled me out of the water. I'm set at 1,000 rolls, and I'm 660 going strong. So I got 340 more rolls to do. You have no idea what you can do until you do it.
When I'm on the whitewater and it's lifting me up and down, I feel like I'm on a nature's roller coaster. I feel like almost like it's been designed and put there for pleasure. It's a beautiful feeling. I don't want my military experience to be my last great adventure. 13 years later, here I am training to do something I probably would have been afraid to do when I had vision. A kayak down the Grand Canyon.
Wow. Wow, what an incredible video.
It gets me misty. I know those people very, very well. I'm close friends. Travis has stayed here at my house. So has Brian. Many of them have stayed right here, or I've stayed with them in their homes. They become friends. They become family. Team River Runner is like a family. It's a national family. We hear that all the time. And we've had, some amazing experiences, and we've had a lot of success. We've also had suicides. We've had at least 10 veterans that we knew that while they'd been paddling with us just could not handle that invisible weight anymore. And of those 10, 4 of them I knew very, 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 very well. So it's very hard to think about how important it is that we accommodate and reach out through accessibility, everyone. And that includes people that you may not even know are disabled. I can tell you, I was sat on the pool one time at Walter Reed with someone who was missing a leg, had got blown up and lost their leg, and was learning how to kayak with us. And we were looking out across the pool at a veteran that was sitting in a kayak and just kind of stared off into the distance, that 1,000-mile stare. And he said, he nudged me and he said, "Hey, they took my leg. I'm fine with that, man. I served my country. They took my leg, but they didn't take my mind. I'm so much more lucky than that individual over there. Look at that. They took his mind." And I think there's so much of that happening right now in our nation. And you at the Audubon Natural Society, anyone that does anything that can bring people outdoors, it's not just wheelchairs. And it's not just even the blind. It's those individuals that have had something taken from them that might be an invisible wound or an invisible scar. And I think you heard Travis say it. Don't let the last great adventure they have be what they were doing before whatever affected them. So, open the doors for them, to come through. I mean, we we had a blind veteran that paddled with us at one of our clinics, the same one that Travis was at. Travis was at that. And in fact, this particular individual I'm talking about, Travis, Lonnie, who was on that thing, and Travis, the three of them, they stole my van. I'm not making that up. We were out in Montana where we train for whitewater because there's wave trains, but there's not that many rocks. You can get around the rocks. It's relatively safe rapids. I mean, you got to watch a few places, but we're pretty careful about making sure they have the skills to be in a kayak, like those folks you just saw. We were parked at a small market, like a small grocery store out in the middle of Paradise Valley. And I had the van parked on the side of the road, and those three guys decided to stay in the van while my wife and I went in to get some groceries to make dinner that night. It was after the main clinic was over. Most of them had gone home. These three stayed after to paddle one more day. And when I went back to find my van, that was gone.
Wait a minute.
These three,
were they all blind?
all three. Yep, totally blind. So what they did is that Lonnie was at the wheel, Aaron was on one side, Travis was on the other side. They used their canes to feel around to make sure that he could back up and not hit anything. And then they saw that they were fine. They didn't know where they were. And then that's to back up the van. And then they pulled forward and they used their canes. They would walk slowly in the front and went around behind the building. And then they went around the building and went to the other side of the building. And they had found the bay of a car wash. And they were trying to hide it in the car wash when I found them. So they're just really fun. And accessibility goes way beyond anything that you've even thought of before. It's just something never think there's a boundary. When I ask people about taking blind veterans in kayaks, I called a number of different well-regarded nonprofit adaptive sports programs because we were still relatively new. This was 2000 and I don't know, maybe 10 or 9. We were only 6 or 7 years old, and we were thinking about taking blind people paddling. Maybe 2008 or 9. It was a long time ago. And I called these organizations. Oh yeah, we take blind people kayaking all the time. We have these big double kayaks. We put them in the front. They just love it. Well, that's bicycling. That's what they do on a bicycle. They ride a bicycle and they're in the back of the bicycle there. They just pedal and the other person's riding, but they're just really just pedaling. But in a kayak, they're on their own. They're doing their own thing. And we were like, nah, I think we're going to try a different way. And everybody was like, no, you really shouldn't be doing that. And we were like, well, we really are going to do that. And that's kind of what we've done, is that we figure that as long as we're trying to keep them safe and we're not going to hurt them, we're going to keep pushing the boundaries. And that you can do that with nature in so many different ways. You can push those boundaries. You just don't even know them yet.
I want to ask some more about pushing the boundaries and why nature is the right setting for everything you've been describing. But I also want to give you a moment to take a drink and say we have some questions. So 2 are in the chat, and then Tracy wants to ask live. So I'm promoting Tracy to panelist so that she can come on and ask you her question when she gets ready. But also Pat says that her late husband was a marine biologist who passed away 7 years ago, and she has his wetsuits. Would you like some wetsuits?
Sure, she can donate the wetsuit to us, and
Great.
I'll probably sell it for $2 to a veteran. I don't give anything to them. They have to put skin in the game, and that's that purpose. That if you come and paddle with us and you start wanting gear we want them to become boaters. We don't want them to be we want them to be participants and then become a boater, be in the boater community. So yeah, we do that, and it depends on the size of the wetsuit, but I'm sure someone. Believe me, there's chapters I'm driving a trailer to Green Bay in a couple of weeks, and I could take the wetsuit up there. I just got to figure out how to get it. So hi, Tracy, you're on mute.
Yeah, Tracy, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Joe, how are you?
I'm just ducky.
Good. Apologies, I missed the first couple minutes of the conversation. First, it's funny. My son lives in Appleton. Well, he goes to school in Appleton. So when people talk about Green Bay, you'll be driving right by his university. So that gets me very excited. But my question goes to sort of the piece that you were talking about just a few minutes ago. I'm in Gaithersburg, Maryland here, and I am part of an organization called the G Park, the Gaithersburg Parks, Arts, and Recreation Corporation. And our goal is to sort of unite arts, recreation, and parks sort of activities sort of under a banner and advance those activities for all the citizens of Gaithersburg and beyond. And we tend to use the parks as the place we do these things, right? And we're focusing on underserved communities. And I was struck by you saying that disabilities are the biggest minority. And to be honest, I hadn't really even thought about disabled folks as a minority until this invitation popped up in my email. And so to my question, one of the projects we're working on is mapping all the trails in our parks. And then we're going to put up artistic trail markers, if you will. And so I was thinking, and we're kind of in the process right now of thinking what these trail markers might do. And what I was thinking about is it would be great if there's somehow that the trail markers could fill some potential need that, from some segment of this disabled community. And so I wasn't sure how to think about that. I honestly just kind of popped into my head, but I didn't know if you had any suggestions. I mean, the one that immediately comes to mind is putting Braille on the trail markers, but then I don't know how they would find the trail markers, right? So those are the, me being an abled person, I don't really understand how to help the, disabled people because I can't,
If someone was to be hiking a trail, we have a lot of our veterans that paddle with us also hike, and they have to have a guide. They can't hike by themselves. And so if the guide was to say, hey, here's an what do you call it? Like the Park Service, they put up those things that you kind of read about.
Right, a wayfinder is what I think they're called.
Yeah, or it describes a prairie or you go to Yellowstone, there's a thing that says this is the,
a little kiosk.
Yeah, and it just tells you a little bit about it, so you could put it there, and then they could feel it. Or you could also, when we teach them about river rapids, we will put sticks on the ground with stones. And we'll say, this is kind of like what the shoreline might be. This is the rocks that you'd be going around. This is the direction the rapid's going. And they could feel it with their fingers. They could feel, so you could make your trail have a map that shows where it's going to go, and you could have it be three-dimensional. So whoever your artists are, do a three-dimensional map that has the trail that they can feel with their fingers. It maybe be like dotted lines. I mean, you come up with a way to make it tactile for someone who's visually disabled. When we ran the Grand Canyon, we ran it with it was very expensive. Oh my God. It took us forever to put that thing together. Jeez. And that you guys don't even know about it just crushes me, because we wanted it to make a big enough deal that veterans would say, oh, I'm going to go do this with you. So it would help our outreach. And it did a little bit of that, but not much. Although I have a lot of blind and visually disabled veterans that paddle with us. But the point I'm making is that the Grand Canyon's in layers. There's all these layers that go up and down. And so the guide who was in charge of the trip, he knew those things very, very well. He's a geologist by training, and he did that with sticks and he used all kinds of different tactile things for people to feel. This is the kaibobs. This is the Vishnu schist. This has happened, and how many years it was. So just, something tactile. It doesn't have to be just Braille. It can be described.
I think that's a great, I can totally, and the thing is we actually use seniors generally and youth to do these things, right? So we're engaging the seniors to help with the painting and the youth to help with the, whatever. And I can certainly see our youth being quite innovative, right? About how to use something that's tactile.
Yeah, turn them loose. Like that's what I'm saying, no boundaries, is that, so I mentioned, and I'm kind of going off of your trail. Does that help you with your question?
Yeah, it does very much. You gave me great ideas, and thank you very much.
And I'll come back to it if I think about stuff, because that's the way my mind works. I'm ADHD, so I just kind of never stop thinking. Drives my wife crazy. So here's an example of you might come up with something you do with this. and this could work for someone who has a real need, like autistic individuals. They need very clear, specific directions and don't deviate. So you could have headphones for them that give very clear directions that you don't deviate, that says you're going to be walking this trail and it's going to go up a hill and go down, whatever, you know. And I'll tell you what we did, because if you think about how we live in the world, we live with our 5 senses: touch. Okay, so blind people see with their hands, sight, our hearing, our taste, and what's the other one? I can't remember them all. Taste, touch, hearing, sight, and smell. So a lot of our veterans don't have smell anymore. When they got blown up, they lost that. And then one of our veterans, one of the ones that stole my van, he got spinal meningitis and went deaf. So he's not only blind from trying to disable an IED, but he's also deaf. Now he's had cochlear implant, which has some minor success, so he can kind of hear a little bit. We invented the technology to guide him in his own boat. One of our Marines, who's, like I say, I have these unicorns. He is a retired Marine, and he's our chapter coordinator up in Pennsylvania, and he invented a life jacket. We call them personal flotation device. And on the front, on the sides, and in the back is a box that's radio controlled, and it vibrates. And you have a toggle switch on your paddle, and you push the toggle switch forward. Where do you go? Forward. You push this toggle switch to the right. Where do you go? You go right. And you can push it a couple of times to kind of like give them, and so they can paddle with this PFD, blind and deaf. But we also used it with and this is where I'm going with this, with your senses, is that we used it with another blind participant just to see how it might work with someone who's blind that we normally guide by voice. We'll just guide it with this vest. And they went out paddling with this thing for about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes or so. And when they came back, the first thing they said was, I could hear the silence. I could hear the birds. I could hear the water hitting the side of my boat. I could hear my paddle hitting the water. And so sometimes the sensory stuff is very, very important. You can hear the crunch of the leaves under your foot. You can feel the wind in the trees. You can hear the wind in the trees. Those are things that you all could consider for populations that are not in I'm in the world of getting them to go paddling and be successful and enjoy everything that goes along with paddling, where we are, what we're doing, what's out there around you, the birds, the fish that jump around, whatever. We now paddle at Riley's Lock. We don't paddle at Anglers anymore. It's crazy there. Yeah. And we paddle at Riley's Lock, and we keep 2 trailers there. And Kaleva and Team River Runner are connected at the hip. Kaleva has just been a godsend to us. And so we use their equipment. We use our equipment. And the Montgomery County Parks built an adaptive put-in for us there so that individuals who have mobility issues, who are aging, or anybody, I use it to get in and out of the water sometimes just because whatever, it's easy. So that's where we paddle mostly, Riley's Lock. And then we also paddle, we have a whitewater, and that's flat water and whitewater, but mostly flat water. So we are not, when we began, I want to go back to how we began. I'm a whitewater boater, but I'm a boater. I'll paddle a box in a bathtub. I don't care. But we do a lot of flat water because that's what people need. It's exercise, it's social, and they need to see the trees overhead on Seneca Creek, or see the vast Potomac River, how vast it is, the amount of water that's in that water from the watershed. Talk about the watershed, talk about the cleanliness of it. If there's a big rain like we just had, why is it so muddy? What's maybe in that water? We may not want to talk about it, but it's there. And so those kind of things. We are also, if we could get the funding, which we're always working on getting our funding up, I'd like to connect stronger with the Potomac River keepers and maybe have a couple of spots that we have regular sampling that we do, but that's going to be more volunteers and more money, and we're barely keeping up what we're doing right now. But you get the idea, is that we find venues where mobility is easy for them to get to and from the river, and our chapters are looking for the same kind of thing. When you are designing an adaptive, this is for kayaking, but it may something to be thinking about for your facility. There's really only 3 things we think of. I mean, it's pretty simple, or else I wouldn't do it. Remember, Peter Principle, I rose the level of my incompetency. They want to be able to park so that they can get to and from the activity. Parking is number 1. Number 2 is a bathroom, handicapped accessible bathroom. And number 3, access to the activity in a respectful manner, so that they're not being, it doesn't take an hour to get them somewhere where everybody else is doing it in 10 minutes. You know, the idea is that they need to feel with some accommodations on par with other individuals. They need a bathroom accommodation, a parking accommodation, and a respectful ability to enter the activity. For us, it's paddling. And so we work very, very hard on always trying to increase our technology, our instruction, and our where we are, to make it accessible for them to get in and out of the water in a respectful and relatively quick manner. When I adapt a boat at Walter Reed, and I whenever I teach somewhere, it's the 15-minute rule. When somebody rolls up in a wheelchair or comes in on a walker, I'm like, we need to get them in the water in 15 minutes. Everybody else is like 5. But we need extra time to do the adaptations or to the special instruction or whatever. I don't want them to feel like they're going to sit around while we're cutting foam or doing all kinds of crap. Sorry about the language. I'm around a lot of veterans. You should hear the way they talk. Anyway, that's what you want to do. You want to be thinking about how long does it take to get them going? What are the adaptations we're going to do? And be thinking about, for you all, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking sensory. What are the sensory kinds of adaptations or accommodations or instructional adaptations you can make to help them, understand and feel, hear, smell, touch, see, or not, one of those things. And if they're having mobility issues, well, that makes it all the more interesting on what to do. But find new ways to be accommodating for people who are aging that can't go as far. That's where the paved trails are money. They're awesome. If they have hills, that's kind of hard. They're going to have somebody help them get up and down the hill, or safely go down the hill so they don't go crashing into a tree. So we're always looking at how to make sure that we don't roll a veteran down a hill into the river in their wheelchair. That would be a little uncomfortable for them and for us. So
I want to ask you to go back on something you said. So I understand that when you're talking about physical disabilities and mobility issues, there is a huge technology component. And you've talked about so many really cool examples of that you guys have used or invented. There may also be a brute force component to help somebody over a rocky place or something. Maybe they follow a manpower component, I guess I should say. Maybe they follow a guide, or maybe they do need some, the wheelchair needs to be lifted in a certain place. But what about those? And I feel like, those are the kinds of things that might take some practice and certainly should take some expert consultation before trying to do them for the first time. But they are sort of, as you've described them, a series of problems to be solved. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the invisible disabilities and the importance of what you just described, respect in access. Can you just talk a little bit more about those 2 things, and what a nature organization or a paddling organization, anybody who wants to start interacting with people whose disabilities are invisible and recognize the need for respect but doesn't quite know what that means? What advice would you give us?
Well, I think the first thing is that we work with adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have a lot of disabled kids, although we do have a program called Chaos. All of our blind programs are called out of sight programs. I did not name that. The blind veterans named it that. But if you go on our website, you can find out of sight, programs, and we have out of sight, all kinds of out of sight stuff. We also have a Chaos program, KAOS, Kids Are Out of Sight, where we have blind veterans teaching blind children how to paddle and just how to know that they can have this adventure in life. So it's very small. Again, a lot of the stuff that we do is going to, take more staffing and more funding than we have right now. And remember who's in charge here. So that's why I'm always working on trying to up the game. We work with 2,000 veterans a year. That's nothing. 34 states, there's 50, and there's a whole world out there. I'd like 200,000 people paddling, but that's, just me. The invisible disability is the largest disability that you'll see. And so when we have individuals their children that come that have any kind of a neurological kind of issue or a developmental issue, or, of those things that I've talked about, we rely on the parents to tell us what's going on with them. So, if you have somebody that comes to you that has those kinds of issues, autism, any kind of developmental disability, which I think now is called something differently, but I can't remember the name. I'm working pretty hard on all these new nomenclature, but I'm still just a 69-year-old knucklehead. So you want to get their expertise on what it is that helps them understand. The most important thing you need to have is that they are just people that just want to understand and enjoy what they're doing. They came to you to go do something or to expose their child or their adult individual with this invisible disability to the outdoors. And so you need to be very clear about what it is that you're going to try to, what your goal is, what are the objectives, and make them very simple and very clear and follow them. And if you have to deviate from them, say, hey, we suddenly came upon a windstorm. There is a big cloud coming. We thought it wasn't going to come, but it did. So we need to turn around, head, those kind of things. So you have to really, they need to know what the heck's going on. And you need to be very clear and concrete about it. So when we have individuals that have a very serious traumatic brain injury, we stay very calm. We never want to get, excited about things. We also are very good about tracking what other volunteers or individuals might be saying. If they start to go south in areas that would be uncomfortable, which would be saying or joking in a way that would be calling attention to something that is not appropriate, we stop that right away. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about any of the major social things that are going on. We don't talk about politics. We make sure that it's a safe space. And we call it an eddy. In whitewater, for those of you that don't know, if you look at a rapid, you might see a rock in the middle of the river. Well, behind that rock is going to be area where there's not a rapid. It's moving, but it's not moving very much, depending on the rapid. And that's called an eddy. And we are an eddy in the middle of this craziness that we all know is going on. And so it's really helpful to me and just in my personal life, because if somebody starts to try to talk to me about something, I'm like, you know what, Team River's kind of taught me I don't need to talk about that, because that's just I want to stay in an eddy, and I got my own viewpoints, you got your own viewpoints. Why don't we just talk about how the Caps are going to do tonight or something. But so you want to always be on guard about keeping a calm level affect, having very clear details about what it is you're trying to accomplish with your walk or your instructional program. You can look on our website, by the way. We have a whole adaptation section, and it's open to anybody. And it has some documents that you can download about working with individuals that have post-traumatic stress, that have a traumatic brain injury. Those are the two main invisible disabilities that we see, is post-traumatic stress or a traumatic brain injury. Although one of the individuals tonight in the pool was a veteran who is still active duty, but all of a sudden his MS kicked in and he has some mobility issues, and he was unsure he could paddle, but he did great in the pool and had a great time. And, we didn't have to do any kind of a special accommodations, although we do have them. He was able to get in a boat and paddle around and not fall over. So don't have high expectations that, are unreasonable. Don't have low expectations. The expectation is for them to just enjoy the time that they spend wherever it is you take them, and that you're going to stay calm and chill and be pretty clear and concise. And if there is a youngster or an older individual coming that has some sort of issue that is of a invisible nature, but it might be neurological, ask the adult that's with them, hey, what works best with your brother, son, daughter, husband, whatever? How can we make sure that they have a really good experience here? And what would you like for them to be able to do?
So be open and clear about it. Don't try to, it sounds like you're actually giving a really concrete piece of advice, which is don't try to pretend or elide that there is no difference, right?
There is, yeah.
Ask questions.
Don't when I had one of the participants tonight was a wonderful young veteran who contracted, whatever the disease was that she contracted, and they were whittling away her legs. So she was missing both legs, and she said, just started with my foot. And, of course I just, all I could say to her is, that really sucks. That's really about all you can, and that's pretty much sums it up. Why get into is there anything else that's work that, I need to know that I don't want you to have any more difficulty other than the fact that, that particular thing sucks. Let's just have a good time in the water. And she said, no, there's nothing else. I don't have a back issue. Because that's what I'm searching for. Do you have a grip issue? Do I need to work on your grip? Do you have a back issue? So I need to make sure that your seating is good. Is there something else? Because I want to make sure you have a good experience. So you can say, is there something I need to know so I can make sure you have a good experience? If they say, no, I'm good, you want to kind of, watch them. They may not be telling you the truth. If they are having a hard time walking a little bit and that they're going to have to pick something up, maybe your activity is going to be where you're going to be handling something, ask. And I know that we're really COVID sensitive, but we shake their hand. If they can't shake if they kind of hand you like this, that's a clue that they're not going to have a good grip. So for us, that's really important for a paddle. So we need to accommodate the grip on the paddle, which we have. You actually saw it in the video, but you didn't even see it. Steve Baskus, who was one of the blind paddlers that went by, when he was in a Humvee, and the blast came through the left side of the vehicle that blinded him immediately. And it also injured his left arm. And so he has a very poor grip with his left hand. And we accommodated that with Kevin Carr technology so he could hold the paddle and run huge whitewater.
Wow.
It was pretty cool, so sometimes they don't even, just being respectful about what that adaptation might need to be. You have to think about what it is that you're doing. And then, call people. Here's something you might want to get in the habit of doing if you're going to be doing a lot of hiking with people that might have physical disabilities. If you're going to reach out to, cancer institutes or some of these issues, MS, organizations. And you can tell them to come paddle with us. It's fine because I got veterans that'll teach them. I have that stuff. I just like to know ahead of time. I don't want somebody to show up that's missing all 4 limbs and, I'm like, oops. And I have taken individuals that have missing all 4 limbs and accommodated them to be able to paddle. I got a vision in my head of one of the veterans who was blown up and lost both arms and both legs, paddling across a flat water area, guiding a blind paddler on me. And I remember watching that and going, oh man, that is amazing. I wish I had a video of that, but I just have it in my head. I'll never forget it.
Wow.
But wander around toy stores, wander around hardware stores, go looking, walk up and down the aisle. I do it all the time. I'm looking. I wonder if there's anything in here I might use to help someone who needs a helping hand with something. There might be something in there you can say, you know what? If I put that doggone thing on a tree, well, here's the thing. You might have on a particular tree, maybe you have a wind chime that sounds a certain way, and that's a white oak. And maybe you have a wind chime that sounds another certain way, and that is a red oak.
That's a really cool idea.
Well, I just came up with that. So what I'm saying
to you, cool idea. We could do that immediately at Woodend.
Well, that's you think out of the box. You start thinking, what am I trying to accomplish here? And here we've had this one little short, I've been an hour and 11 minutes with you, and we have a cool idea that you could do like tomorrow, 2 different wind chimes. You could say, yeah, you hear that? That's everywhere. And you get 10 of them, and everywhere there's a white oak, you put that, and everywhere there's a red oak or a sycamore, pick 5 trees, because then they're going to know 5 damn trees. And, then maybe, God, they're so good. If they're blind and they hear the wind in the tree, they might hear the leaves sounding differently, because they do.
Or they'll feel the bark and they'll pick up the leaves underneath. They'll pick up the acorns. They'll learn the shape.
It's a white oak. They're going to reach down into the duff. They're going to feel the pointy, leaf. Red men shoot pointy, arrows. That's the red oak. I learned that at the Audubon Natural Society. Now, I don't know much about, I've been, my career has been giving back to those that are affected by life, special ed kids and their families, and trying to get them outdoors as much as I can. And then now this paddling thing. So, I've always wanted to be able to spend more time, identifying wildflowers and the birds, and I can do a little bit of it just over time. You amass that kind of knowledge, but hey, great blue herons, man, GBH. And, I saw a beaver when I was walking at Lake Needwood, Lake Frank. So at Lake Frank, there was a beaver across my path. I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool beaver. I hope he doesn't want to, because I've had beaver attack 2 of our paddlers.
Well,
They
given
do
how much
attack.
time paddlers spend down by the river and on the towpath, we do a lot of our walks on the towpath. Here I am being recorded. I'm not making promises on behalf of our senior naturalist and our naturalist staff, but like we do a lot of wildflower walks and bird walks and spring leaf walks and memo walks, on the C&O Canal, because it's such an amazing hotbed of biodiversity in our region. Given that you've already got, your folks coming out there regularly, we could maybe we could match up a time, a nature walk and then a paddle, a nature walk before, after the paddle.
Or we have individuals that paddle with us, but their family doesn't particularly want to paddle, or their wife doesn't want to, or their, maybe we could just say, hey, we're going to try this. If you have someone in your family that really doesn't want to paddle, but they'd like to go for a hike with a naturalist and learn about the canal, learn about the wildflowers, about the trees. That's just something to consider. We would add that for those individuals, because I'm thinking right now, one of my veterans, a Marine who was in Afghanistan, was helping us teach tonight. He's actually took on the purpose part and he's helping us teach. And his wife never comes to, he's like, I got to find something for her to do. And I'm like, well, have her come down. He goes, well, I don't know if she wants to do that, but maybe she might be into that. I don't know. I try, she'd actually take pictures. So maybe your naturalist might say, hey, bring a camera and I'll show you how to take pictures. I don't know what you do. We could talk about that later.
Talk about that later. Yeah.
Yeah. We just I'm open-minded to anything, but here's the big thing I say all the time. I never know who's going to show up. I never do. It could be 3 veterans. It could be 20. It could be none. I tell the volunteers, we're going to go paddle. If they don't show up, I'll take you out and I'll do an instructional thing, because I'm happy to do that. Or we'll just go out and paddle and we'll kind of work on skills. And maybe we'll play kayak football. We play kayak football. We'll do something. But if there's a veteran there, or there's a participant that wants to come and learn who's got a disability, and we do have some non-veterans that come and paddle with us, that's going to be your job. So, ante up, but don't think that you're going to have a lot of people. That's why I'm on this thing with you. The more people that know what we do, if there's someone out there in your world that knows a veteran of any variety, Vietnam, I have an 87-year-old Marine that runs whitewater with me. I am not making that up. Larry is 87 and he paddles whitewater and he's amazing. So I want you to know what we do, so you can spread the love out there that Team River is available for veterans to get healing. And if they want purpose, we want them to come in and work with us. And if you know somebody that wants to come out and volunteer, we want those young volunteers. I'm 69, I'm going to be 70 years old this year. I can haul those boats around right now. I ain't as good as I once was, but I'm good once as I ever was, once a week on Sundays. I'm carrying those boats. So we're always looking for new folks to help drive our trailer, do outreach, help us with our mission.
Yeah.
And maybe we will add nature walks in once a month. We'll advertise it, see how it goes. I don't want to promise that I'd have people that would do it.
That's fair.
My stresses are trying to make sure everyone that knows that we're just going to go paddling and be together out on the water. We're going to have a healing experience, an empowering experience on the water.
I hear what you're saying. And Team River Runner has a very, very focused mission and purpose, which is, in fact, Audubon Naturalist Society has a pretty broad mission, although a tighter geographic area. So, so we have a little bit of a problem with coming up with new program ideas sometimes and wanting to just go and do them. And I am, in some ways, not only admire, but it's kind of exciting to hear about how focused your mission is. You don't talk religion, you don't talk politics, you don't talk social issues. That all makes sense. And you just focus on the paddling and then the nature. And I guess that's the last question I have. And what I'd actually ask you to close out with is, you've touched on it a few times, but can you talk a little bit more about how you've seen people respond to being in nature? I think the video made so clear about the feeling of empowerment and ability that people can have when they are in control of a boat, in a way that they haven't been before, or they obviously had to practice to get to that point, but you know what I mean, before they got on the boat. But, and then that's part of it is, and we talked about this before we set this up, there's the physical element, the being an athlete, the being a warrior, but then also you're spending time, you're doing that in nature. Nature is the setting. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that. How have you seen people respond to that blue sky, to the sound of those birds? Just, tell us a few more stories or,
well, I got a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of just thoughts about it, which is that, even if they're blind or visually, they're looking around. They're taking it in. They're in something that's outside their comfort zone a little bit, which is really kind of what you want to kind of do. You want to get them outside their comfort zone, just a hair, and have them experience as much as you, with whatever senses you can have them experience the wind, the sun, the movement of the water, all those things is nature. It's the Great Spirit's gift to us is this wonderful planet, and they get a chance to be out in it, and they all love it. They're so calm and excited at the same time. There's, if you think about when you go out, you're in both worlds at the same time. You're both excited about the opportunity to get outside and out of that room and out under the sky and feel the snow or the rain or whatever's hitting you. And so you're a little excited about that, but there's a calming because you're in something that is, you don't even know it. Well, you know it because you're Audubon Natural Society, but most people lose touch with the natural world. And so we give them an opportunity to actually have an adventure in the natural world. And so for them to be able to float amongst the trees on Seneca Creek or out into the sun and feel the difference between the creek being cooler and the river being warmer in the summer, that's a powerful thing. Why is it that way? Well, because the sun hits it out here. It's not shaded. It's more broad. It's a heat sink. You can talk about those things. What might be out here? What's living out here? There's fish here. That's why you see the people on the shoreline fishing, and it's coming back. It's getting better. See, that's a great blue heron. We didn't see that when I first started paddling 30 years ago. We didn't see a whole lot of great blue herons. Now they're everywhere. So you see the river rebounding. You can talk about how, we talk about how the Clean Water Act, made it possible for us to be able to paddle relatively safely here in the summertime when the algae comes up, and we can talk about those things. And they can just get a feeling about where they are in the natural world, the size of it, the immensity of it on the Potomac River. We are just a dot on this planet, and they're just a dot on the Potomac River. When they leave that creek and get out there, they're like, wow, this is a big river. So they all feel those things, and they articulate it in many, many different ways. They just know that they're out, and they're just happy to be out. So is there a particular thing that they say? So many different things that they say, but they just are connected through the water to what's living around them. And we're just happy to be able to give that to them, if nothing else, for just an hour or two on a Sunday, or, when we teach them whitewater, that's all about adventure. It's still kind of cool. But when we're out there on our Sunday paddles, our family paddles, and the flat water paddles, it's just all about being in touch. They're so excited when they see a great blue heron, or if Lord should, be kind to us, if that eagle that lives up there on the upper Potomac should fly over here. Hey, there's a bald eagle. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah, he's got a nest right there. So it's just neat to be able to share with them something that we take it for granted.
Yeah.
Don't take for granted what you have every day right in front of you, right outside your door. Right. And so, we talk about that. I'll give you a good story.
Okay.
It's a really cool story. So when we, I think it's called the Devil's Slash or Devil's Slide, when we paddle in Paradise up in, on the Yellowstone River in Montana, that's where we do our out of sight clinic, because it's beautiful. We can take a blind veteran from having never touched or seen a kayak, from flat water to running class 2 whitewater in a week. We have them all week long. We paddle them twice a day. We crush them physically, but we paddle them twice a day. And so 3 of the days in a row, we paddle this one section, which is just moving water and some really easy class 1, class 2 riffles. And we go by So on both sides are the mountains. You got I can't remember the mountains on both sides.
Sure.
We're north of Yellowstone National Park. One of the mountains has a big red gash in sandstone, comes down, and it's called Devil's Slide. It's very obvious. It's beautiful. Comes off the mountain, and we go by that thing every day. We hit a whitewater, and then we hit some flat water. We hit whitewater, we hit some flat water, and then we go by Devil's Slide, then we hit some whitewater. Well, one of our blind veterans, as on the third day, he goes, "Hey, Joe, what? Devil's Slide's right over there, isn't it?" Sure enough, it was. You don't think they're in touch? They're in touch. They may not say it until they say something like that, but they will sometimes surprise you. And then later on, he said, "Off to the right, that's where that buffalo herd is, right? Up that's grazing in the grass up there. There's a private buffalo herd up on that valley." Yep, it's right up there. So,
Wow. So he was
you don't know
what he had heard and attaching it to the place and the sense of motion and maybe even the smells, who knows, and the sounds.
And so for some of these at-risk kids, having them, just teaching them you don't try to overload them with too much. Give them just enough that they want to come back for more. You want to tease them with knowledge and tease them with an adventure, even a hiking adventure. For a lot of, what is an adventure? An adventure doesn't have to be running whitewater or even paddling in flat water. It could be walking 100 yards into the woods, and you're terrified of snakes and worms, like my mom was. And so she would never let me go in the woods ever when I was young because of snakes and worms. And, I rebelled against that. Like, you can't believe how I rebelled against. That's why I'm such a nutcase, because I'm not like what they grew me up to be. So when you take them 50 feet into the woods and you teach them, some at-risk kid is going to say, "This is really cool.
Yeah.
This is poison ivy. Don't touch that. That's what it looks like. You see 3 leaves, probably it's poison ivy. It could be something else, but that just gives you an opportunity to know that. Oh, yeah. This is jewelweed. This was the original thing that you use for poison ivy. Let them touch a touch-me-not. I'll never forget the kids that I would take down to the creek in the fall, and I'd let them touch a touch-me-not and watch it explode. They would just about, cried all the way home. They were like, "That was so cool. That was so cool." This is why it's called jewelweed, because you stick it underneath the water. Little things like that. That's all they need to experience, and they'll remember that forever. Yeah. Right, Riley? I know you want a treat. We're coming. It's coming. It's coming. Stay calm.
Well, Joe, with that, this has been an enormous pleasure. I mean, I put in my marketing materials, like, Joe's funny and he's a good talker, and that was just from our short conversation beforehand. And it's true. I had such fun listening to you.
I go blah blah. If my wife was sitting here, she's not here. She's out, with her sister right now. But if she was here, would you shut up and let them talk? I go blah blah blah.
No, this was so great. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions that they want to ask. We're going to be wrapped up in 4 minutes on the dot.
That's fine. I'm good.
So I'll be processing this recording. We'll send it out to everyone who registered. A couple people who registered did not come, and eventually we'll make it out for free. But the other thing is that we'll make sure at ANS internally, we'll be watching this later in the year. There's just such a wealth of ideas that that you can give to us, and then that way everybody knows about hooking up with Team River Runner, because we are increasing our veterans programming at ANS, and we do. It's great to know what are the other options we should be telling people about. Tracy, you want to say?
I just want to say, since I'm still co-presenter, thanks very much. This was great. And thanks, Eliza, for organizing.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And your great questions.
Thanks for organizing. Thanks, Tracy, for that question. It got me thinking,
Very, very helpful, and lots of great ideas came out of it. So appreciate it.
No kidding. Yeah.